Hello, I'm Rick Sinding. It's Tuesday, April 9th, 2019, here on the campus of Rutgers University at the Eagleton Institute of Politics. With me today for the Center on the American Governor is Dick Codey, who has spent almost continuously the last 45 years as a member of the New Jersey legislature, first as an assemblyman and for the last 37 years as a senator. But I say almost continuously because of a variety of unusual circumstances. Not once, not twice, but 3 times he has been called upon to serve either as acting governor or as governor of the state of New Jersey. Senator/Governor Codey, welcome to Eagleton.
My pleasure.
Let's start at the beginning of your career.
A long time ago.
Yeah, it is. Well, no, actually, let's start at the beginning of your life.
That long time ago, too.
I saw a biography that says that you grew up in your family's funeral home in Orange.
Yes, I did. And we lived on the 3rd floor. Elevator only went to the 2nd. And for a while, the air conditioning only went to the 2nd as well. Oh. But my generation and the family, both sides, we are now, my generation, the first to go to college and live in a house. Before that, nobody had that opportunities. And my parents always stressed to us, the 5 of us, that we could buy a home, but then there's no way you can get to college and you're going to go to college. Mm-hmm. So my parents sacrificed, and so we lived in the funeral home. And I think a good deal of my success came from watching my parents serve people in a time of need. And I saw how well respected they were in the community, how beloved they were. And so that was a lifetime of lessons. Mm-hmm. And they taught us well. And I always tell a story about my father. When I was 14, I was told I was going to work the parking lot. And he told me just one thing. He said, now listen, if there's no parking spots left and a priest or a politician pulls up, you're going to find one. So that was spheres of influence. You know? Yeah. They can decide whether or not you get this funeral or not. Mm-hmm.
So you spent all of your upbringing in Orange, or the family?
Yeah, I lived there until the day I got married, so it was like 37 years.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a long time, but it was absolutely great. We had a main street, so people came together, people of all backgrounds, and believe it or not, we got along. Mm-hmm. And that was also a great lesson in life. And mm-hmm. In fact, when I got married and had kids, and we moved to kind of the West Orange border, but in any event, I had 2 sons, and so I would take them down to the Newark Boys and Girls Club on Saturdays for about 4 months a year, and let them play in a basketball league, swim, whatever. So I wanted them to be exposed to as much of a variety of kids, and generally they were the only white kid in their group of 100 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so today, nobody's going to sell them a Rolex on the street. Mm-hmm. You know, that's for sure.
This would have been late 60s, early 70s?
No.
Maybe a little later.
I didn't get married till I was 37, 38.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So, yeah, no, you're talking 80s.
The 80s, uh-huh.
Yeah.
By that time, you were already in the legislature.
Yes.
How did you get involved in politics? At a very young age, I might add.
Yes. So here's how it went. Orange was non-partisan, shall we say.
In Essex, there were places in Essex County that were nonpartisan?
Absolutely.
Right.
So you ran...
Oh, I see. The municipal elections, I got you.
So you ran as your Richard Codey for councilman or mayor or whatever. So it used to be like 25, 28 people. A lot of them very colorful, shall we say. And so somebody approached us, my buddies, about taking somebody's signs down for money. So we took the money. Then we took another candidate's money and the other guy's money, and so we made a good living out of it.
Classic Essex County story.
So I decided that what we should do before the election is decide in a vote what 5 people, you know, they were all males, shocking back in those days, 60s, we would like to see win. So we would stop taking down their signs. That was our endorsement.
Your entrance to politics.
Right. My first endorsements.
What prompted you to run? And what was the first race? Was the Assembly the first race you ran, or did you run for something else before that?
I ran off the line. When I turned 21, you were allowed to vote back then. So I wanted to run, and I ran for county committee, which is not a public office, but a party office, off the line against the organization.
The organization being the Essex County Democratic Organization, which was the Harry Lerner organization at the time?
You got that right. So my district was maybe mostly white, Irish, Italian, Jewish, Protestant, black. So they put me on the Jesse Gray for president line, which was, the party line was A. I think we were on like the N line.
This would have been 72?
68.
68. Okay.
68. So that day of the vote, after about 3:30, I borrowed a limousine from somebody who serviced my dad's funeral home. Excuse me, and I picked up all the nuns. So they came in to vote, and there was a lot of them in those days. So the next thing I know, they were opening up the machines to see how I was doing, and I was up a few votes. Well, within the next 2 hours, the organization was all over my district. So I lost by 3 votes. I never lost an election for public office. So the next day I went down to see the clerk, and I explained to him what had happened. And he said, "Kid, let me give you some good advice." I said, "What's that?" He says, "Next time, you're going to be the candidate. You showed them. So just keep your mouth shut, and you'll be all right."
This was the county clerk?
No,
No.
the local clerk.
Oh, okay. Because the
Local
county
clerk.
clerk, who was known at that time as the man with the golden hand,
You got
was
that
Nicky
right.
Caputo, who always managed to find column A for
Well,
the
they still
organization
do
candidate.
nowadays. If you've been watching anymore. How they do it, I don't know. And the clerk in Essex County is a relative. He would never do anything wrong, I can assure you.
Okay. So, flash ahead to 1974, which is the New Jersey, 73, the New Jersey
73.
gubernatorial election. Byrne and Essex County Democrat is at the top of the ticket. You're running for the Assembly. Were you the organization candidate at this point, or were you still a maverick?
Believe it or not, I was.
Uh-huh.
And that was Watergate.
Yeah.
So, but the general election didn't bother me. The district was all Democratic. So the congressman, Congressman Minish, who was a friend of my family, he wanted his son to be an assemblyman. And our senator was Pat Dodd, very well-liked young man, got a lot of publicity for being a bachelor and having a certainly active life, shall we say.
A colorful lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So he ran on the outside against us and ran a good campaign, but we won convincingly.
How many Assembly candidates were there that you were in?
It was
the primary?
myself and my running mate, Eldridge Hawkins, African-American from
Right.
East Orange, and myself from Orange. And as I said, we won handily. But to be honest with you, in 73, if you ran as a Democrat and you were an idiot, moron, whatever, you won.
Well, the Assembly that year was 66-14, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
or something
I
like
mean,
that.
there was some people.
Byrne's coattails were enormous.
Yeah, there were some people who were elected as Democrats that, other than Watergate, would never get elected to anything.
Yeah, and 75, there was a bit of a back to normal.
It started.
But
2 years
but you
later,
did.
and
But you
then-
were in the majority throughout
Yeah,
your 8
and
years in the Assembly.
Interestingly enough, the minority leader was Tom Kane,
Right.
who went on to become governor. Now, when I was working for my father, the gentleman who provided limousines for our funerals was from Livingston, and one of his accounts was the Kane family. So if my father wasn't busy and he had work, I chauffeured, for his company, and he had the Kane estate. All right. So on occasions, I would drive around and chauffeur his parents. All right? So I got to know the father, who was a congressman,
Right.
and the mom, and wasn't ever allowed in the house. I don't know if that's because I was a Democrat or my religion or whatever. But so I used to kid the governor about that too. And I used to say, you know, we got a lot in common, both in politics, both from Essex County, so forth and so on. And both our ancestors came over here in a boat. The only difference is your family owned the boat. I mean, we were downstairs, they were upstairs.
When you got elected to the legislature, did you come at it with a particular set of policy points of view? Did you have an ideology, would you say? I mean, were you a Democrat because you had a particular ideology? Were you a Democrat because Democrat is how you got elected in Essex County? Did you grow up in a political household?
My father had an interest in politics. My uncle, not a Codey, got elected as a councilman or commissioner or whatever. So it was kind of around me all the time. And you'd see the politicians coming in and out, of course. But no, it was kind of rare in Orange to find a Republican. I mean, it was what it was. So
But what prompted you to run for office?
I just, because of, I would always, you see the elections in town, and they would have, or the candidates would have motorcades. So it was a lot of activity. It was a big deal. So I became interested in it. And at best, I thought maybe I could be mayor or something, whatever. But, you know, I was also interested in a lot in sports, particularly basketball, because, you know, in Orange, we didn't have too much grass for football. Hockey was unknown to us, soccer. So the main sport really was basketball.
Well, that's been a large part of your life.
Yeah, true. And my parents happened to be Seton Hall season ticket holders as well. So, and it did become part of my life. And to this day, I just finished my 8th grade team, won the Essex County travel league again for the 3rd time in a row.
And so you continue to be a feeder to the Seton Hall basketball program.
We've had some good players. In fact, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
I didn't do travel with him. I did some AAU with him. He's done rather well.
Yeah, rather well.
Despite my little coaching efforts.
Would you say that you had an interest in government? I mean, did you think about?
I did, and then my, an understanding the Irish Catholic population back in the '60s. So when John Kennedy decided to run, my dad, since his dad came from Ireland, my grandmother, so they had an intense interest in seeing somebody who was Irish and Catholic succeed. So I certainly followed that. And where I went to grammar school, when you got to the 5th grade, the girls got one wing of the building, the boys the other wing, And we were taught by Christian brothers, and most of them were immigrants. So they were really into John Kennedy. And so they were going through the primaries in the spring, and Kennedy had done well, but now there was a big primary in West Virginia between Hubert Humphrey, who was a Protestant, and John F. Kennedy, who was Catholic. And West Virginia at the time was like about 80-something% Protestant. And so the trend and the view in the country was that Kennedy couldn't win West Virginia because he was Catholic, and the Pope would run him and tell him what to do, and he won. So it was great. And then, in fact, I didn't think about it at the time, of course, but then the brother at the time, after he won, made us read the Diary of Anne Frank. I guess he was pretty liberal at the time, obviously. So he wanted to teach us about discrimination, whether it was against Catholics or Jews or anybody else. And eventually, with my wife, we were able to view Anne Frank's apartment. So it was nice, and I was able to establish the Holocaust Commission in New Jersey, you know, to teach students about whether it's the potato famine in England, what the Nazis did, or any other kind of genocide.
Yeah, yeah. Now you served both of Brendan Byrne's gubernatorial terms in the Assembly and in the majority. In 1981, when Tom Kane was elected governor, you were elected to the Senate.
Yes.
And served in the Senate, well, served almost continuously, as I mentioned in the introduction, for the next 37 years. I think it would be safe to say that you first gained statewide prominence in 1987, when, as the chair of the Senate Institution's Health and Welfare Committee, you took the name of a deceased convicted felon, got yourself a...
Yeah, but I would say this before you go there.
Okay.
I got somewhat some notoriety. The speaker at the time, back in the late 70s, when casino gambling became legal, he called me and said, "Hey, listen, kid, you're single."
Is this Chris Jackman?
No, Bill Hamilton from
okay.
New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Asked if I would chair this committee, state committee, and do all the casino legislation.
Oh.
So I said
Sorry,
yes.
I missed that in your
Yeah, that's
bio.
right. So I flew all over the world learning about it.
So this would have been 76, 77,
Yes,
that period?
yeah.
Mhm.
Right about 77, I think it was, because the referendum failed the first time.
Right.
A lot of people didn't know that. But in any event, and then I remember when it did pass, going down to the Chalfont Howden Hall Hotel, which eventually became Resorts,
Right.
to meet with the president of the Resorts. And I asked him how many people were staying that night. And he said there was 2 rooms occupied, one by me and one by somebody else.
Oh, God.
Right, and then obviously it took off, and eventually I got to know Mr. Trump when he came into Atlantic City back in the 80s. But during the legislation, everybody said, oh, well, there was 2 sides. Oh, the mob's going to run it, and then there was people who said the mob should run it.
Right.
They would do a better job.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was an
Maybe they
interesting
were right.
period of my life to
So were you a principal sponsor of the bill?
oh, yes, yes.
So was Persky in the Senate and you in the
Oh,
Assembly,
yes,
or-
Mr. Persky, who I admire and respect. But the one story about Steve was that he approached me one time and he said, I think we should make the rooms a certain size. No problem with that. And he said, how about this size? So he told me later that one of his relatives owned a certain hotel and just happened to meet that criteria.
Oh, the Persky family was
It's okay.
was pretty active in the Atlantic City area.
Oh, yeah. So I spent a lot of time, even after going to gaming seminars all over the world. And it was a very interesting period of my life. And I'll tell you this. So one time, I think it was in maybe the early 80s, and we're studying the issue of maybe changing the tax, make it higher. And it was a break in the action for lunch or whatever, and people from Resorts were around. And I said to the treasurer, I said, listen, and they're open a couple of years. I said, how come you've never had Rodney Dangerfield down, to entertain? He said, who the hell's that? I said, he's a comedian, whatever. So I found out from Resorts attorney, who was a good friend of mine, Joel Stearns, a great human being.
Yeah.
He said, so the president asked the treasurer, what were you and Codey talking about? He said, he wants some comedian to come down and be one of our acts. He said, who was it? He said, some Rodney something or whatever. So he said, what'd you tell him? I just told him, no. He said, really? Listen, you call that comedian, and we're going to book him. So they booked him. So I went down. I have this great big picture of me and Rodney in a white bathrobe, black socks, and a cigarette.
You or him?
Both. No, I wasn't in the bathrobe, thank God. So I
No, I meant the cigarette.
no, I don't even smoke either. But so I found out that he was the first act I made money on.
It astonishes me. Now, I don't know the age group of the people who are going to be watching this or listening to the transcript or reading the transcript of how many of them would know that Rodney Dangerfield would have been something of a household name at the time that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think he.
It kind of does astonish me that the treasurer of the organization had never heard of him.
Well, Caddyshack really propelled him to great notoriety, shall I say. So where'd you want to go?
All right, you know where I wanted to go. You took the name of a deceased convicted felon.
Yes.
You got a phony Social Security number and card, and you applied for and got a job at the Marlborough State Psychiatric Hospital. I think it's testimony to what a low profile the chairman of a Senate committee has, that you could go undercover for 2 weeks.
Well, that's true.
At the Marlborough Hospital.
Well, that's because we're dominated by Philly
Yeah, of
TV
course,
and
yeah.
New York. But
you uncovered some really grotesque situations.
just let me tell you how I got there. So I'm working in the funeral home, and one of the jobs is to pick up dead bodies. So in those days, Greystone, which was about 20 minutes or so.
Greystone was another psychiatric hospital.
Psychiatric hospital in Morris
much
County.
nearer to where you were
Right.
living.
So you would be sent there to pick up dead bodies often. They had thousands of patients back in those days. If you had Alzheimer's, you were there. All kinds of diseases that, people shouldn't have been there or whatever. So in any event, I go up and you go to the main office and they give you a key and a young patient, to help you with the body off the slab. So this particular day was a young man my age, about 19. So on the ride down and back, he was telling me horror stories about what was going on up at Greystone. So when I got home that day, I was telling my mom, and I told her if I ever got in a position where I could help these people, that I would. So that's where my passion for people with mental illness came. Now, as you're well aware, fast forward quite a few years later, and I get married, and my wife gives birth to our first child. She became seriously mentally ill. But my passion began from being an undertaker's son, but then it put it in another world when my wife was a severe sufferer.
And this has become a major theme of yours throughout your career now.
Tomorrow I'll be down teaching school personnel about how to work with kids today. Because listen, when you and I grew up, teenagers did not commit suicide.
Right.
When generations behind us grew up, they did not commit suicide. In the last 15 years, it has exploded. Here in New Jersey, 1,200 teenagers every year admitted to hospitals for failed suicide attempts. Anywhere from 75 to 95 to 100 teenagers dead from suicide. So why did it happen now and not with past generations? So my Foundation for Mental Illness, we go around and talk to both students and teachers, administrators, and it's not definitive, but I don't know about your religion, but I was all in Catholic, so we were known as a Catholic funeral home, but we did Protestants, Jews, African Americans, whatever, but primarily Catholics. So all 5 of us went to the local Catholic school, which is about a 5-minute walk, if that. And next to that was the church, the cemetery, the rectory, the convent, and everything else. But so without realizing it, that church was a big mentoring thing for me. And let's be candid. Now, my sons don't go to church. I don't know about your children, but whether you're Catholic, African American church, temple, or whatever, there are less and less people going to religious services. And they feel that growing up is a good mentoring system for young adults. It's a hub of activities. You have more friends as a result, whether you go to public school or any kind of a Catholic school. And of course, Catholic schools are closing very rapidly. The other issue we talk about is the issue of bullying. Now, when we were all kids, there was bullying that went on. But my generation and generations after me, you went home to the safety of your home. Now that doesn't exist because the social media walks in the door with you. And so we have teenagers, young teenagers, some not even teenagers, sending out bullying messages. There was a young girl who got what's called bombed from so-called friends about you weren't invited to a party, ha ha ha, and eventually committed suicide. We had a 9-year-old recently commit suicide. All that because of the social media bullying.
You've identified two almost intractable issues here. One is social media, the other being absence of religion. What can you or your group do about it? What can government do? What can anybody do about it?
Right. So further, there's less block parties today in our country. When I was growing up, you had a boatload, I was going to say something else, of social organizations. It was the Polish organization, the Irish organization, ethnic organizations, Knights of Columbus, Sons of Italy, on and on and on. They don't exist that much anymore. So there's less and less interaction for all of us, regardless of where we live. And that's not good. You may find this strange. Just recently, Great Britain created the Office of Loneliness. Now, that sounds weird, and I'm sure it does, but they felt they needed it because they were finding out people had less and less friends, less and less opportunities to socialize with other people of their same age. And what are we going to do about this? And it was a leading cause of loneliness, depression, anxiety, and suicide. And let's admit it, my son's 30, 33, whatever, and I asked them, in high school, was suicide talked about? Absolutely not. Now you talk about suicide and depression and anxiety. I didn't know anxiety or depression.
Well, maybe you did, but you didn't know what it was.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't label it. I didn't understand. All I knew about suicide was it was such a taboo that if we had a deceased who had committed suicide, an adult, that's the only ones that did, the Catholic Church did not allow a mass to be said or a Christian burial. So it was really something that was really a real no, no, no. And there wasn't, in all due respect to the church, sympathetic there. And we would have to find a priest that might allow us to get away with it with a church service or a burial, but it was, it wasn't allowed.
Let's fast forward here, because we could go on and on these
See how
subjects.
fast you can get.
Yeah, we'll go as far as we can. I wanted to take you up to 1989 and Jim,
oh, you mean when Seton Hall got to the final game in the NCAA tournament?
No, I meant when Jim Florio got elected governor. But
well, Seton Hall got to the final
90,
game before
1990.
Florio got elected.
Was it?
No, he was 89.
The Michigan
state offices are never in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
So he's off years.
Okay, I got you. Well, before we get there, to either Seton Hall or Jim Florio, what were your impressions? Because we're doing this for the Center on the American Governor. So let's talk a little bit about the governorships of Brendan Byrne and Tom Kane. who were the governors during your first 8 years in the Assembly and your first 8 years in the Senate. What kind of relationship did you have with either the governor himself, or what kind of interactions did you have with the governor's office during those two administrations?
Okay. So with Governor Byrne, he was friendly with my dad, and they would often play tennis together. So there was a relationship there, and of course, I was his state senator when he ran. I mean, the state assemblyman. So I knew him well. So I dealt with him quite often, and I can remember that,
And of course, you had driven the family, as I recall, so that was another connection.
And his father was a politician, Brendan's. So he wants a state income tax. We didn't have one. Now, I represented the poor district. For them, it was the right thing, but they didn't think so. There was not too many people in the state who wanted a state income tax. Understandable. But I realized it was good for my district. So for me, it wasn't a vote of conscience. So,
well, it might have been a vote of conscience that also that was also something that was of benefit to you, that simultaneously was a benefit to you.
Not like
you do well by doing good.
It's not like abortion. It's not like
no, I understand.
Assisted suicide
Right.
or recreational marijuana.
Oh, okay, right. We'll get to that maybe.
Okay, that's all right. So in any event, so he had called my party chairman, which I resented. You want to talk to me, you talk to me, right? And the chairman at the time, a big, powerful guy.
Is it still Harry Lerner at that point?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
And he called me. He said, listen, I don't really give a blank, but he called me. Okay. So I think it was Bob Mulcahy or Harold Hodes mentioned, we need you on this. So I said, well, I got a big problem. What's that? He said, well, 280 was open 2 years ago, and there's a big bottleneck in West Orange, at the bottom of the hill, beginning of West Orange, because somebody got to put an exit in Orange. So the next thing I know, Alan Sagner,
Commissioner of Transportation.
right, lands a helicopter somewhere close to my house. He comes to my house and says, here's a set of plans for an exit on 280 going west. Okay. So we've accomplished something. And eventually, the city of Orange named the exit after me. And I'm like, yeah, but it's an exit. I'd rather have it be an entrance. But what are you going to do? And I mentioned it to an assemblyman from Hudson by the name of Jack Kelly. I said, Jack, go into the governor's office and tell him, nah, I changed my mind, I'm not for it. And then let him approach you about something. So.
Horse trading.
Yeah. So eventually he got something. He thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I said, Jack, where I grew up, we knew that.
and
you're from Hudson.
You was from Hudson and he didn't know
You
it.
really should have known it if you didn't.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story about how business was done in the 1970s.
Yeah, but
and may yet be done today.
Yeah, the Governor Byrne and I would often talk, particularly about the casinos. So we worked very, very well, and I had a great deal of respect for him. He was a gentleman. He was never a bully, never a boss. So we worked well, very well, and I have a great picture of the two of us in boxing gloves at some point. And we got it done, and when he signed the bill allowing the first casino to open, he said, I want to send a message out there to the mafia or whatever it was, organized crime, I guess would be a better word. Yeah. Keep your stinky hands off Atlantic City, which they did, for the most part.
What about Kane? I had mixed up the stories.
That's
You weren't a driver for Byrne, you were a driver for the Kane family. Now, he's from a different political party, but also
Correct.
from Essex County.
Correct.
So how does it differ when you're now dealing with a front office
Well,
that's Republican.
Well, we're
Of course, now you're in the Senate, not the Assembly, but
right. Yeah, but as I said, I had a relationship there, and so I can remember him calling me to vote for an increase in the sales tax, and I was like, I don't know. I felt bad because I liked him. I didn't really care that he was a Republican, you know, but the leadership was kind of saying no. So, you know, I wanted to help him. So I worked it out to get somebody to help him get the increase he didn't want it. But I really worked very well with him. And I chaired a committee, and he knew that he could call me on issues. And one time we had a big issue with the casinos, something they wanted, and they didn't get it. And I was part of the reason, a big part of it. And he called me, he says, Dick, I couldn't tell you how happy I was that that proposal didn't go anywhere. So we got along very, very well. I did not, I'll be honest with you, when he was running, I didn't think he could beat Florio. I went to
in 81.
In 81.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I went to an event in West Orange about a week before, and there was maybe 80 people there, and he lives in Livingston right there. I didn't think he could win. I was wrong.
Well, by 1,797 votes.
That's about as close as you can get.
Yeah. Now, Florio's first 6 months, and not even first 2 years. Let's talk about the first 6 months. He had auto insurance reform, assault weapons ban, Quality Education Act, bunch of taxes because of deficit for the current fiscal year, and a presumed deficit of much larger for the next year, a huge amount of taxes. How did you approach the votes on those highly sensitive and highly controversial issues?
So he wanted a new way to distribute money from the income tax. But again, for my district, the right thing. So myself and another state senator, Dan Dalton, from South Jersey.
And a former Florio staffer when he was in Congress.
We both felt that he shouldn't do all of this at once. And he also raised the sales tax, if you remember. I don't think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That
All
was
the
big
taxes.
too. Okay.
Sales, income.
Yeah, but one of the taxes was on toilet paper.
Right.
And we're like, Governor, no, that's not a good optic, whatever. But he didn't listen to me and Dan and John Lynch.
And John Lynch, who also felt the same way.
Right.
Joe Doria, who was the Assembly Speaker,
felt
wanted
the same
to.
way. Even stronger than us, shall we say. But he didn't listen. So obviously he was getting crushed. And the interesting thing about Governor Florio, now here's a guy who's from Brooklyn, not exactly Princeton, all right? And got to figure street, right? But so we would have these meetings with him. I was part of the leadership, and on Mondays when we were in session. But he would, when you'd walk in the room, he'd never say to you, "Hey, Dick, what'd you do with your kids this weekend?" Or, "Hey, Giants did pretty well," or they stunk, or whatever. He'd go right into, now on this assault weapon ban, or on this particular bill. So it was hard for him to kind of, it was always issues and never people. And I said to him, why don't you just forget about issues and talk to people about their lives, what's going on with their kids. But he could never kind of do that. It just, it wasn't him, and he didn't have any particular interest that lined up with the average person. And him and his wife were bird watchers. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but that's not a big colony out there. you know. So you got to find things that you can connect with people. And what I used to do when I had a tough race back in the 80s, back in the days when people actually picked up their land phones, I called thousands and thousands of people asking them what their issues were. And a lot of them were kind of put off. How many times does the state senator call them direct? But I'd engage them in conversation. I'd say, Mrs. Jones, is the Acme store still down there? Does Mr. Kurt still own the drugstore? You know, how's the playground or whatever? So you made a connection with them. And sometimes they say, you know, this street's got to get paved. So the next day I'd call the mayor. And then, see, what I would do was, so Mrs. Jones, a letter to Mrs. Jones was already on the outside. Inside, thanking her for the conversation last night. So I would write her name, and then it would be delivered maybe the next day. So very often I would go into a house, and I'd see a letter from me framed. You know, in a poor community, that was a big deal.
Retail politics.
Oh, absolutely, positively. I made 3,000 phone calls in about 4 months when I thought I'd have a tough primary, and people said you could never win that race. And I did, and it was because of those phone calls.
I think most congressmen now spend about the same amount of time
Yeah,
on
but
the phone, but they're
raising
looking
the
for
money, right? Not making that personal connection. I can remember calling a woman, Italian-American woman, in Madison when I got my new district where the Democrats wanted me to lose because I wasn't going to listen to the power brokers. And I called her, and somehow we got talking about sports, and she was a fanatic about the baseball museum, and she told me she had them change 10 things. This is a woman in her 80s. I'm like, wow. So we never even talked politics. And she was a Republican, and her whole family, and they're big Republicans. So they all had signs up for me. And a couple of years later, the family called me and said, Mom's dying, and she'd love to see you. So I went and saw her, and she talked about sports, and she said, if my family needs you, you'll be there for them.
Now you're describing a level of personal detail that a legislator can have in a district that's a little more difficult for a governor, who are comparing this style to Jim Florio's style.
Yeah, but either that's your style or it isn't, whether
Right,
it's on
right.
you're on a bigger stage or not. Now, before I came down here, as you can understand, I have a foundation for people with mental illness. So I got a call from somebody from the district. My son's in another country. He's hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. How do we get him back? How do I get him into a good psychiatric hospital here? And then very often, me and my wife would get calls from all kinds of people in lower stations in life and some of the biggest big shots in the state of New Jersey. My wife's got a problem. My son has an issue. Can you help me? And we help them. And we're happy to do that, whether they want to come in and sit with us in our living room. And, you know, we let them cry and tell them where they're at mentally. And we tell them, listen, the thing is, we would like to say to people, one is that suicide is a permanent answer to a temporary problem. And that it's okay not to be okay. But it's not okay not to ask for help. So you're here asking for help. And that's what you have to understand.
Right.
It's not going to go away tomorrow, the next day, or the next week. But with the medications out there, and if you stick to it and you want to get better, you will get better.
When you were urging the governor in the Florio administration to take it slow, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Did it occur to you? Did you think it was likely or even probable that in the following election you were going to find yourself in such an enormous minority for the first time in your legislative career?
I thought it was possible as things were going along, and then when you looked at some Bradley
Right. You almost
Whitman,
almost lost the
election polling that was relatively close. You still thought he was going to win. He did, not by a large margin. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was possible. I don't think I thought about it a lot. But he didn't lose by that much, Florio.
No, but in 1991, the midterm.
He was not on the ballot.
Right, and the Democrats lost big time. This must have been a closer election for you than just about any other one that you've had.
I would think so. I don't know if I've ever won without at least 65%. Maybe yes, maybe no. That year, I don't know what it was, but we won fairly easy.
You were one of a relative handful of Democrats who survived that midterm election.
That's absolutely positive.
And now you find yourself from 91, well, basically for the rest of the 1990s, in the minority party.
True.
How different is it to be in the minority party and being in the majority party?
Somebody once said you don't have to worry about being ethical or right. That came from a Republican.
You mean when you're in the minority?
Yeah, you can just say whatever you want, right? But I took it seriously.
But in those days, even in those days, compared to today, the New Jersey legislature was not nearly as fragmented or as partisan as it is.
Well, that's because the unfortunate appearance of the bosses they were creeping in, but they hadn't taken control. So you could operate with your conscience.
Now it's interesting because certainly at the time that you entered politics, New Jersey was very much a state of bosses.
Yeah.
Then
you're right.
That subsided after Watergate.
There was a big difference. Those bosses didn't bother you about normal legislation. They didn't bother you about their personal interests in legislation. They didn't bother you about taking over the legislature, and they didn't bother about you voting their way. They cared about judges that came out and a few appointments, and that was it. Their base of business was county government and freeholders,
Right.
not state legislators.
Right.
So that was a relatively new phenomenon that slowly but surely crept into this system of government in New Jersey, and it's been an absolute incredible disaster.
Well, you've had. Well, we'll get to that. Let's remain chronological because before we get into some of the conflicts that you dealt with. For the last 2 years of the Florio administration, and then throughout the Whitman administration, you're moving up you start as the assistant minority leader after the midterm in Florio.
With John Lynch as the
right. Lynch is still
Yeah.
he was the Senate president. Now he's the majority leader. Then you move up to minority leader. And would that have been
with
the Whitman election, or would that have been later?
Yeah, but there was a little bit of a fight there. I was John's assistant, and then John wanted to move out, meaning Lynch.
Right.
And at that point in time, Mr. Norcross had moved in, was making a stake.
Okay, we're talking about George Norcross, whom I hesitate to say this, but when you're referring to the bosses coming in, were you referring to Mr. Norcross in South Jersey?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
It is what it is.
Just to be clear.
So well, first of all, he really started a little bit before that. I was the assistant to John. He wanted one of his people, a young man by the name of John Adler, Senator Adler,
Right.
to become the assistant and not me. So I'm like, and he got friendly with Lynch, I'll leave it at that, who was a friend of mine, and he convinced him with all kinds of things that he wanted Senator Adler, not me. So they thought I would fold.
Was there any particular reason other than geography, as far as you know?
Geography has got nothing to do with it. It's all about power.
Well, but Adler
he-
being from South Jersey and you being from the north.
Listen, as long as he can control you. That's what
Okay,
counts.
doesn't matter where you're from.
Doesn't matter where you live.
Gotcha.
Not relevant. So I said, no, I'm going to fight it. Okay. So I had never, I was in a meeting with him, which I was not too impressed because he was acting like a bully, whatever. So we ran into each other in Atlantic City, and basically it was an FU, oh no, FU, and
Oh, my.
we were separated. So they didn't have all the votes, so we came to a compromise that there would be 3 minority leaders, and I would be the #1 minority leader.
Uh-huh. So this is the beginning of a long-standing feud that continues to this day.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't like bosses telling people how to vote, controlling them through their jobs, their incomes. I think it's wrong. It's everything that I'm against, and people should be against as well, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, we haven't gotten a pay raise in a long, long time. And in my opinion, that's because certain bosses want certain legislators to be accountable to them for their income. Why else? Everybody else getting raises, right?
Do you want to provide any other examples of this?
Yeah, well, we just had a round not too long ago of staff increases and everything else, well needed, and we're still at a level that we've been for maybe 15 years.
And is George Norcross the person who is responsible for that, or does he have colleagues who are similarly inclined?
Listen, let's be candid, good, bad, or indifferent. He was the second most important person in the Christie administration. Might have been a Democrat, but that doesn't matter. In fact, one time I was at an event for Byrne, and it was myself and Governor DeFrancisco, Governor Whitman, myself, and Governor Christie. So when I got up to speak, I pointed to Governor Whitman, and I said, well, she's responsible for making Donnie DeFrancisco the governor of the state of New Jersey. And there's Jim McGreevey here, who is responsible for making me the governor of New Jersey. And there's Chris Christie here, who's responsible for making George Norcross the governor of the state of New Jersey.
Did it get a good laugh?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure under his breath he was cursing me. But there's no secret.
No,
I mean, hey,
really not.
listen, if he wants to try to be that person, Mr. Norcross, and if somebody lets him, then the bulk of the shame is on the elected official. You let that become too much of an influence. And was it a good thing? I don't think so. Mr. Norcross has the right to lobby for any of his interests. If you look at where the money has been dispersed, it's to the least population. But, he's fighting for his area. I don't fight, quote unquote, for my area. I got to protect my district, of course, but I'm sympathetic to any other area that needs help and should be, and whether it's in Camden County or anything else. I don't care where Mr. Norcross lives. I got to do the right thing.
You mentioned Governor Whitman.
Yeah. I liked her.
You're now you're in the minority. You're a minority leader throughout her
Yes.
her governorship. So you don't have a lot of power, but you still do have. I mean, certainly you have some influence over your caucus.
I'm the person is expected to be critical.
Right, and you were.
Not that much.
Well, how did you? Now, Donnie DeFrancisco was the president of the Senate.
Yeah,
in that period.
what was interesting.
And how did the two of you get along?
Fabulous.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So the biggest problem for her was her Republicans. Not me. I would criticize her on issues, But there was a feeling over within the Republican legislature that she was kind of above that. And I always, and I said, I liked her. I feel I'm friendly with her and very respectful. I actually hired one of her relatives to be an intern, fine person. And when I became governor, interestingly enough, I called her because McGreevy used to just criticize her every day because everything was her fault and so forth and so on. And
Well, he had run against her in '77 and then, or, I'm sorry, 80 I've got my years mixed up. 97 and then
yeah,
in
but
2001 became governor.
My thing was, when I became governor, that I would not criticize former governors. And I did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I called Whitman, Governor Whitman especially, because Jim had really gone after her and blamed everything on her. So I just thought that if I were her, and Codey's the minority leader, so she knows I'm a big sports guy, pick up the phone and say, Dick, Seton Hall's playing Saturday. Do you want the governor's box at the arena? You got to pay for it, but, pay for the food. Never happened. Or, all right, Dick is in the building today. It's not a legislative day. Ask him if he wants to come down and have lunch. So, now to me, that's what I do. But she didn't do. And I think lacking that kind of street savvy or whatever hurt her. But, I thought she was a very decent people, and when I became governor, I called her and said, listen, I know Governor McGreevy criticized you. That was his style. I'm not going to criticize you or any other former governor. So I hope you could come around when you should, and feel free to feel that I'm not going to badmouth you. I have no reason to, and I respected you, certainly as a first woman to become governor of the state of New Jersey and have no angst against you whatsoever. I could care less that you're a Republican.
Let's talk about the first time you became acting governor for, if I'm not mistaken, 3.5 days.
Oh.
Is that right? This is one of the
weirdest things in the world.
One of the, I mean,
because
you can hardly describe it. But
well, it's hard to describe, but the new legislature gets elected and sworn in a week before the new governor. So since DeFrancesco was the governor, and since he was no longer a legislator.
And he was the governor because Christy Whitman had resigned to become the environmental protection,
right.
US EPA administrator. And DeFrancesco, for the final year of the Whitman administration, functioned as the acting governor because the Senate president became the acting governor.
Yeah, but I actually changed his title.
Yeah, I know. We'll get to that.
I did him a big favor,
yeah.
And myself.
So then 2000 and, where am I here? 2001 election.
So in 2002, the beginning
right.
of 2002,
yeah.
there's a week where you have no elected governor whatsoever. So, in a freak of nature, the Senate became 2020. So, who's the governor for a week? So John Bennett and I sat down.
He was the Republican leader.
Absolutely, and that had never happened before. So how do you run the Senate if there's two people in charge? So we took months and months and months and wrote a book about what we're going to have to do this, and never opened the book. We didn't have to open a book because I liked John, he liked me, I respected him, he respected me, and we never had a crossword whatsoever. We became good friends. And
you functioned as co-presidents of the Senate.
Right up to this day. So he told me...
Well, for that 2-year period. You didn't function as co-presidents up to this day. You functioned as co-presidents of the Senate for those 2 years.
No,
right?
Right, for
yeah.
co-president.
You're friends of...
But then we were also essentially co-governors.
Well, during the
right,
period
so
between the
1 week,
the new legislature being sworn in and the new governor being sworn in.
Right, so he said to me, Dick, can I take the first 3.5 days? I said, sure, what do I give a blank, right? But John really took it very seriously. I kind of took it very humorously. 3.5 days. So, in fact,
Wasn't the Attorney General also
the Attorney General
for
was
like an hour
for
or
a
something?
half hour or so. I don't even know if he knew it. Who cares? But so one time, John and I are in the governor's mansion, and we're doing whatever the big show was back in 2002 in the morning, okay, cable show we were on. So they said, well, we'd like to have him on for some more discussion as well. And John said, I'm not doing that. So whoever the host was at the time I said, I'll stay on for another 50 minutes. I don't give a rat's ass. So at one point, they decided, would you take question? Yeah. So somebody calls from South Carolina and says, you know, Governor, I've been through your state, and the food at your rest stops on a parkway stinks. I said, okay. So where are you from? South Carolina. I said, well, here's the skinny, sir. Those of us who live here, we know the food stinks. So it's people like you from South Carolina who eat there, not us. So take it for what it's worth, okay, pal?
You had fun with this, John, didn't you?
And by the way, I said to him, listen, you deserve it. Any state whose nickname is Gamecocks, come on.
Is that what else did you do in your 3.5 days as acting governor?
Me and my sons watched Blazing Saddles in the governor's mansion.
You actually stayed in Brunswick
For one night.
Ah, very nice.
One night only.
Now,
Isn't that a song?
for the first 2 years of the McGreevey administration, you and John Bennett shared the Senate presidency. How did you do that? Did you do it on alternating sessions, or?
Yeah, we took like 6 months at a time, something like that.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't matter because we agreed on everything.
Really?
No, really. I mean, it may sound whack to you, but we never, ever had a crossword between us.
But what about policy?
Same thing. When we disagreed, we disagreed. So he got to post a bill that I didn't particularly care for, and same with me. I could post a bill that he didn't particularly care for. He just voted against it. What do I care?
Mm-hmm.
As long as he's voting his conscience, it's fine with me. Good guy, great guy. And we got along superbly.
How did you end up getting to the majority leader and then Senate president? How did you get to the Senate president's position, given the rivalry that you had acknowledged before with Mr. Norcross?
Well, at that point in time, he wasn't as strong as he was later on. And he and John Bennett got into a fight. He wanted John Bennett to do something in regards to a hockey rink down in Pennsauken, and for him, and something up north for a hockey rink as well. And they couldn't agree, and there was, Mr. Norcross would dispute it, but there was some physical confrontation in John Bennett's office. And he decided, he said, I'm going to get you, you'll never win again. And from John's side, he got all kinds of information against him that was wrong, but the Asbury Park Press printed it, and John lost, and that was it for John in the Senate. And I became the president of the Senate.
But did you have a challenge for the Senate presidency internally?
Internally
among Democrats?
No.
No, okay.
No, the boss didn't have those kind of votes at that particular point in time. Didn't stop him from trying.
I understand.
Even as we were marching into the assembly chambers to elect, they were working hard. Because I'm not going to listen to what a party boss was. I'll listen if it's about the right thing.
But there was not a challenge mounted?
Right,
There was nobody nominated? Okay.
No, not at all.
All right, so now you're Senate president, and
I'm working with McGreevey.
Right, and the unusual situation in New Jersey at that time, which was that there was, well, already Donnie DeFrancesco had been an example of this. There was no lieutenant governor. There was no second in command in the executive branch.
That's correct.
So the Senate president becomes the acting governor if the governor, for one reason or another, leaves office. Christy Whitman had left office, now Jim McGreevey was leaving office, and you were simultaneously the Senate president and the acting governor. Now, when you left that office, there was a bill introduced to say that anybody who had served in that capacity for more than 180 days would henceforth be called governor rather than acting governor.
Now, would you say I had a selfish interest in that?
That you had a selfish interest in it? Did you sponsor the bill?
Yes.
Oh, yes, then I would say so.
You're right. But I also included Mr. DeFrancesco in that. But more importantly, we were one of the few states that kept that antiquated thing. So I'm dealing with the state of Connecticut, who had a governor like the same kind of situation in New Jersey, and one other state around us. So there was only like 6.
That didn't have a lieutenant governor?
Yeah, so in every other state, if you became governor, regardless of how you became governor, you were governor. So, I mean, I'm a streak, I'm not stupid. So, and actually shaved off the name when we signed the bill into law. And Leonard Lance, who was a good friend of mine, Republican minority leader, helped me shave it off. I mean, which is a good thing. I mean, I when I got sworn into office, Leonard Lance swore me in my house. And under the circumstances, I didn't want to have a big party about it because it was rather weird how I became governor, to put it mildly. But so it was 6 o'clock on a Sunday night, and it was going to be in my house with Senator Lance swearing me in, Republican minority leader, my wife, 2 sons, an AP photographer. So at 6 o'clock and at 4 o'clock, I asked my wife, where's our Bible? And I swore down on the Bible. So she said to me, what Bible? I'm like, we don't have a Bible? No. Well, all right. So here's what I'm going to do. So I lived on a street where the priest from Seton Hall Prep lived. I was a facilitator of them buying West Orange High School, which there was 2 high schools. They wanted to close one, the one near me. And so they did, and they took that over and moved off the campus of Seton Hall University. So I called Monsignor Kelly, a fantastic human being. And I said, Father, I'm getting sworn in tonight at 6 o'clock. Would you come down and say a prayer? He said, I'd love to. I said, just
and by the way, could you bring a Bible?
Bible? I mean, it is what it is. He laughed.
I dare say he's probably never gotten a call quite like that before in his life.
But I got my Bible. That's what counted.
That must have been a very strange time. Let's talk first of all about the time between the time that Governor McGreevey announced that he was resigning and the time that the resignation
well, what
actually
happened
took
then?
effect.
So when he announced it, the political boss, Mr. Norcross, was dead against it. He knew that he couldn't tell me what to do, and a couple others joined with him. So I called a lot of people and said, "Hey, listen, I'm ready to do this." And most people said, "Hey, we're going to be with you," but it did not stop them from trying to get him to resign. And it was interesting.
Get him not to resign.
Get him not to resign.
Right, yeah.
So there'd be an election right away. So I had a meeting with him about 10 days after his announcement in his office in the governor's office.
And this was, he had announced in August that he was going to leave in November.
Right, so this was like early September.
Okay.
And I went in and he started pounding the table and he said, "Those bastards are never going to get me to resign. They can drag my body through the streets of Trenton and they won't get me to resign." So essentially that was the meeting. I want you to know that you will become governor in November.
So
for at least 13, 14 months.
Those bastards won't get me not to resign?
Not to resign.
Okay, I got you. Okay. Yes.
Not to resign.
Right. All right.
So
was there a transition? I mean, did you?
No, here's what it was.
You and he discuss?
No, not at all.
No?
So there was about 100 press people outside the governor's office. So I went out and he said, what you just, oh, all these transition issues and so forth and so on. I'm like, okay. And all he wanted to talk about was those bastards trying to get him out.
Right.
So I told my staff, here's what we want to do. We're going to make believe we got a transition going on. Okay?
Now, this is your Senate staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I thought a lot of them were just bullshit. And to a great degree they can be. So what I did, though, was, I went around to every cabinet member in the cabinet, finding out what was going on, and interviewed them. For example, the Commissioner of Health, I found out that there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of licenses that are renewed or given out for the first time out of that department, and the commissioner was signing them, all of them. So I said, Commissioner, do you really do this? He said, yeah. Seems like an incredible waste of time, instead of having, a machine do it, and it's all right. I mean, the qualifications there, so forth and so on. He said, no, I really enjoy it. It's okay. So I said, I got to bring in somebody else. So I brought in Dr. Jacobs, a womanist from my district. I was a little concerned he wasn't involved in politics, who was became a star, and I was really extremely happy with him. So then I brought in the Commissioner of Corrections. I didn't really know the guy, so I said, Commissioner, we'll make this really quick. If there's a riot, okay, in my term as governor, and a riot is described by how many prisoners injured, prison guards injured, you're going to be fired. Do you understand that? Yes, I do, sir. So, of course, some 8 months later, there was a riot. And shockingly, the numbers on those who were injured on both sides came in one short on each side. So he stayed a full term.
How did you inform the incumbent health commissioner and corrections commissioner that their services were no longer required?
Personally?
Okay.
No, the corrections guy I kept because I told him what he had to do.
Oh, I see. Oh, you didn't bring a new. I thought you brought in.
No,
you didn't.
no.
Oh, okay. That was the current.
The skinny
corrections
was.
guy. I got you. Okay. And so with the exception of the health commissioner, you kept them agreed to cabinet.
No.
Were there some who left?
Yeah, and I spoke to them, and I thought, hey, listen, I have nothing against you, but the fact that you were attached to Jim, they're going to bother you and pest you about questions, and you're better off finding something else somewhere. Most of them understood. I would get one or two by act. Some people call me and say, you know what, yeah, you're right. And I got some really talented people who really made well, even after I was no longer governor, and I was extremely proud of them for, doing what they did, and the fact that they were good now shows because they've gone on to really great careers in government and in business and even lobbying, of course. So, yeah, we had a good cabinet. I remember there was one story.
How much turnover was there?
Half and half. So there was a commissioner of, business economic development.
Right.
I think it was named Ginny Bauer.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right? So, good woman, smart woman. So my staff called me and said, Governor, she called and said there's going to be a new announcement of a new slogan for New Jersey. And she would love to have you at that announcement. It's okay. Yeah, we got time that day. So the next day, when I came in, I said, listen, somebody do me a favor, find out what our new slogan is and how we arrived at it. So they said it was a New York firm that we paid $250,000 for the slogan. Okay, so what's the slogan? It's try us, you'll like it. And I'm like, really? Really? I said it reminds me of when I was single. And she turned me down. And I said, well, try it for one time and maybe you'll like it. So I said, we're going to throw that out, and we're going to have a contest. So everybody in the state of New Jersey could come forward with their opinion of what they thought it would be. And so wherever I would go for that 6 weeks or whatever, people would say, how about this one? I said, well, send it in or whatever. And even the press in New York got into it. And I said, you're not supposed to vote. You know, you're not in the state. So it took on a life of its own.
And what
So we had
what came out of that?
We brought it down to the final 5 or whatever, and then there was a vote on that. I forget what the winner was, but people just enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And that's good. You know, and everybody had their own idea. You know, some were really bad, and it was tough to tell them it's really bad.
I remember the very first New Jersey and You Perfect Together, and all of
Well, I got to be honest. If I had the balls, I would have done a commercial with Gandolfini, okay, at the Turnpike toll booths with the silhouette of the cigar smoking. And he would turn and he would say, New Jersey, you got a problem with us? And I thought that would have gained more attention than anything else.
It surely would have.
Yes. By the way, he was not the most easiest guy to get
No,
along
I'm
with.
sure. Tell me about how you balanced your responsibilities as governor and as Senate president. How could you do both jobs simultaneously?
Well, the governor always agreed with the president, and the president always agreed with the governor.
That's an awful lot of power to have in one individual.
Absolutely, but I was fully aware of that. But one of the best things I was able to do is Albio Series, who got to be Speaker of the House, and
The New Jersey Assembly.
that was the New Jersey Assembly, and there was some influence from the bosses or whatever. So I sat down with Albio. I said, Albio, I need you. And we were friends. And he said, Dick, I get it. And he said, but, you know, with all this talk about temporary governors and everything, and there was a cry for do away with it. Mm-hmm. But of course, everybody in my caucus thought they could become governor just like me. I mean, I don't know about that, but that's what they thought.
Who was the assistant majority leader at that point? Who was the majority leader at that point in the Senate?
Byrne Kane.
Oh, okay.
Great,
Yeah.
fabulous,
Widely respected.
ballsy guy, and had my back at every angle. So I told him, you know, we need to do something. So I went to Albie. I said, what do you know? So he said, go, listen, I can help you. I need one thing. I said, what's that? Since I'm a minority, a Cuban, I need to have a lieutenant governor. So that can be a stepping stone for minorities. I said, Albio, I don't think anybody in my caucus wants it. Okay? And you can understand why, so I get it. I said, but I'm going to get it done for you. So, Governor, when you want something, just let me know. And he said, I'll stretch it out and I'll listen to both sides. But I just think that you and I, when it comes to government, are in agreement. I said, I get you. Capiche, okay? So because of him, a lot of the things that I wanted to do that were good and lasting got done because of our relationship. So when those people tried to embarrass me or stop things, I know at the end of the day he had my back. Like, I wanted to balance the budget because, you know, Jim was using one-shot things and Wall Street was saying it's horrible. One-shot deals shouldn't define a budget.
Well, in fairness, he wasn't the first governor to be doing that.
True. Very, very true. So I wanted to cut down on the rebates. I didn't care if I got a political shot from the residents. It was the right thing to do. We needed to balance our budget. And when the budget passed, I called in John McCormick, who was my treasurer, who was a great human being, did a great job for me. And I said, John, I want the names of all the people on Wall Street who are going to rate our budget. He said, why do you want that? I said, I'm going to call him. He said, well, the treasurer does that. This time, the governor's going to do it. John, I'll bet you half of these people live in our state. So I called each and every one of them, and I asked, are you a resident? Okay. And I said, here's what I've done. Check it out. So I got upgrades. And I don't know, but I would say the fact that I called them, I asked them for a little state pride, and a lot of things that they criticized Marie before weren't in my budget. And we got upgrades, and I don't think, I don't know if anybody other got upgrades after me, whether Corzine did or Christie's sure as hell did. All that he got was upgrades, and he was pleased with it. So it is what it is, but that's one of the things I did, and I was extremely proud of that accomplishment.
Now, you're the incumbent governor in 2005, and it's widely assumed that you would be interested in running for governor on your own terms, and as a candidate for election to governor. But you didn't. And there has been much speculation regarding why you made that decision. Want to tell us about it?
What was the speculation? I can tell you the truth.
Okay.
So the problem was that I didn't take over until 18th of November or something like that. And
So a year out, a year before the,
Yeah.
the next gubernatorial election.
so in any event, the idea of we're going to go running on is not my first order of business. I wanted to show that I can govern, I'm going to govern, and I'm going to be active and hands-on and restore credibility to us as well. At the same time, the bosses were, they wanted Corzine, they wanted his money. I didn't have any money, okay, to give bosses. I also found out much later that they also got some contracts from people. People made money in business, legal, whatever. So, and the other thing was there was a poll came out from New York, Carol's poll. Quinnipiac.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's their nickname? I used to know the basketball coach.
Maurice Carroll.
Yes, no, I know the guy.
okay,
That was the
right.
assemblyman's dad. So in any event, they did a poll, and his headline was, nobody really knows Codey. So I called him up and I said, hey, whoa. I mean, 37, 38, 40% did, and that's pretty good. I'm governor a couple of days, for God's sakes. So I said, you ruined me on that headline, okay? So within the next month, I think my name recognition almost doubled, okay? And it was also showing that people liked me and identified with me, all right? One of the first things I did, which was a big decision for me, was the Bergen Record, the Star Ledger called and said, could we have a reporter follow you from the moment you wake up on your first day as governor to the time you put your head on the pillow? I don't care. So they came to the house, I got up, I was still in my pajamas and a bathrobe, walked outside, picked up my papers, came back inside and ate my Cheerios, went upstairs, showered and shaved, got ready for work, and we left, and I went to the Greystone Psychiatric Hospital to have breakfast with the patients, and I wanted to say a large part of my administration will be on a focus on people with mental illness. So I thought it was a great day to shine on them. And then I signed into law a special counsel on mental health to make recommendations what we can do to improve health of those in our state that are mentally ill. And at one point, Michael Aaron, who I liked and respect a lot, asked a question, and those are the days when there was a goggle of reporters around. Is it fair for you to select as one of your most important issues something that's personal to you? And I kind of went at him, because I thought it was inappropriate. And I considered him a friend, but I didn't like it. And from there, I had lunch with the Republican leaders of the Assembly and the Senate, Lance and maybe DeCroce. Did a few other things. Left Trenton early to go to my son's parent conference meeting, which he said that there was no need to do that, Dad. But I did it. Came home. My wife served me spaghetti and meatballs. And then I went out to a function or two and came home. And then the other thing I did was I coached my kids' teams and other teams, and I decided as much as I could, I would continue with that avenue of my life, continue to help with Seton Hall basketball as a cheerleader and other things as well. So I wanted to keep a normal life as I could. I did not use troopers to go to the drugstore to the ice cream store, to dinner, to dinner if it was around my house.
You stayed at your home, though. You didn't move to
Stayed
Brunswick.
at my home. My wife never used the troopers to go to work, which is about a mile or two away. So, you know, interesting though, I was only governor about a week, and my son's playing for Drew University. So we go up, me and my wife, to see the game.
Was Tom Kane the president of Drew at the time?
Yes, he was. And I said to him, listen, you're doing this 9/11 commission. Your goddamn salary, your tuition is high, and you're not here. Can I have a reduction? You know? Come on, Tom. You're in the money. You're down in Washington. You know? He laughed. Oh, by the way, now they just reduced it 25% long after, me. And by the way, I put my businesses in a trust. So I had Kevin up there for $52,000, and my other son was going MKA with Kyrie Irving for $25,000.
That's Montclair Kimberly.
Yeah, I had to borrow money to pay the tuition, and more importantly, my property taxes and everything else. So, but people should have no sympathy. That's nor will they. But it was interesting.
So back to why you decided not to run for this job, as a full-time job.
Did I veer off that?
Yeah, a little bit.
So
I don't know if you did it purposely or whether.
No, not purposely. I got no problem. So I went around to different chairmen and stuff. So, he was giving them whatever he could give them. I don't know whether it was $50,000 or $75,000 a year he could give and other things, which I couldn't do. So a lot of them lined up with him, and I had not yet gained the kind of popularity that I did later on. So basically they signed on. I still had a desire to say, F it, let's run. But there was some people in my circle who were,
Advising you not to?
Yeah, yeah. Some straightforward, some not. But the issue they had hit was, I don't want to use a word, but damn it, you're pretty popular right now. And then when Craig Carton, the Jersey guy on radio, went after my wife saying she should, postpartum depression is bullshit. She's got to go in the kitchen and bake some cookies, so forth and so on. So the next day,
This was on 101.5.
101.5,
right?
and if you've ever been to radio stations, they're about as big as some people's bathrooms.
Yeah.
Very, very tiny. So I had decided, when I found out about this, that since my show asked the governor, was the next day at 7 o'clock. His show ended at 6:55, and then there's commercials for 5 minutes, that he and I would run into each other, obviously. So there was a reporter there from the Ledger, which some people think I planted. Total bullshit. I just assumed she was there because reporters do go to the station when the governor's answering questions so they can write their own stories. So I told my troopers, listen, I don't know if I'm going to be governor too long, but nah, I'm not going to take this bullshit from this guy. So he came out, I confronted him right in his face, and said, listen, if I weren't governor, I'd take you outside right now. He said, what are you going to do, punch me or whatever? And before I knew it, then the troopers split us up. The next day, he's on the radio beating the living hell out of me, and he's going to file terroristic threats against me, and so forth and so on, and going on and on and on. And as a result of that, and one of the nice things that really came about that is there's a story about, so I'll tell you real quick, about myself and Mayor Bloomberg. I never met the man. My opinion of him was, I don't know. So I read where, just before I became governor, the head of the Sports Authority, George Zoffinger, had sent him a letter saying, you're not allowed to land your helicopter here at the Sports Authority anymore to see jet games, giant games. And here's a bus schedule.
Oh.
So I called him up and I said, listen, I may not like this guy. You don't like this guy, but he is the mayor of New York City, and he's going to be allowed to land his helicopter at our heliport. That's the way it's going to be. Picked up the phone, called this press spokesman and said, you tell him that I said everything's good, don't worry about it. 5 minutes later, he's on the phone to me. I really appreciate that, so forth and so on. It's okay. And he said, why don't you and your wife come over and have dinner with me and my girlfriend Sunday night? I don't want to go. But I figured I had to go. So we went, and we had a lovely time. And he was really down to earth. And I really liked him a lot. And we became really good friends as a result of that. And still are today. We don't talk like we used to. But we had a lot of fun with him. And when he was mayor, Pataki was governor. Pataki's about 6'4". I was about 5'10" and a half, and Mike's about 5'8". So we used to stick him in the middle so nobody could see him when we had to do events. And he'd hem out of us a lot. But he was really a very, very, very good guy to deal with. And he would press me a lot on bringing a smoking ban into the state of New Jersey, which a friend from down south was against because he had I don't say he had interest, but he was kind of protecting the casinos on this issue. So what I worked out with Assemblyman Roberts was a ban, but you could smoke on the floor of the casinos. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really good step for the state of New Jersey to do that, because you look at all the health indicators, and smoking is just a horrible, horrible, horrible disease that kills our residents every day. And thank God today, less and less and less New Jerseyans are smoking today than ever before.
So you decided not to run for governor in
Correct.
2005. John Corzine's elected. You're back on the ballot for Senate.
Right.
And still the Senate, and going back to being Senate president.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, before we get there, the period of McGreevy's governorship when you were co-Senate president. Again, we've now gone through Byrne, Kane, Florio, Whitman. McGreevy would have been the fifth governor.
Yes.
We spent a little bit of time on Whitman. What about McGreevy? What kind of relationship did you have with the McGreevy front office? Well, McCormick, obviously the treasurer, you had a very good relationship with.
Yeah, but Jim and McCormick didn't have that good of a relationship.
Yeah, that's interesting.
He didn't rely on McCormick as much as I did.
Mm-hmm. Now, you and McGreevy had been colleagues in the Senate. as
Yes,
well. Yeah.
right. But Jim was the kind of a guy that went to every event. I mean, if there was two people on a street corner, he stopped and got out. And in fact, the mayor of Newark called me and he said, Dick, are you going to endorse McGreevy? I said, yes. He said, well, tell him if he stops coming to my office, I might endorse him. You know, good name. But I would tell you this, I was in Boston in '04, yes it was, and I got a call from Jamie Foxx, his chief of staff, God bless him, and he said, the governor would like to have dinner with you tonight. I didn't know whether it was one-on-one or whatever, I didn't know what was going on. So there was about 8 of us, and he said to me, Dick, sit next to the governor. I said, okay. So during the course of the dinner, he had said to me, you know, a lot of people let me down. I think he was correct, but you brought them aboard, whatever. I didn't think that much of it until, you know, I found out, I mean, which was a total, absolute shock to me. So all that was going
Really?
on in the back.
You had no inkling at all?
They were sitting and talking about this, he and his people, for weeks.
Now, I don't mean about the resignation, but I mean about the reasons for the resignation. Because certainly there were
No, what was
widespread
going
rumors.
on when I was in Boston having dinner with him, when he was in New Jersey, he and his staff and others were having conversations about this threatened lawsuit from his former lover. Okay?
Oh, right.
I had no knowledge of that whatsoever.
Mhm.
I did get a call the night before he announced he was going to be leaving from a news source. I came in late with my son, and my wife said, hey, this guy called and said, return his call whenever you come in, don't worry about it. And he said, well, we got a really good source that McGreevy's resigning, you're going to become governor. I'm like, listen, I just had dinner with don't worry about it, forget about it. And my wife was going for surgery the next morning, not major surgery, but it's going under anesthesia. So I brought her up, St. Barnabas, and my office was right down the street. Hey, Doc, here's my number. As soon as she's, you know, out, give me a call, I'll be right up. So I walked into my office, and my staff says, whoa, you know what's going on? I go, what are you talking about? There's a rumor that McGreevy's going to resign, you're going to become the governor. And I'm like, well, I got this phone call. I'm like, what the hell? You know, then I get a call from a certain legislator, and he said, Dick, Jim wants to call you at about 12:30. I said, is this blank real? He says, yeah. So McGreevy calls me, he says, I'm going to resign right after the election, so you'll be governor for at least 14 months. He said, I'm going to announce it at 4 o'clock. So I put down the phone and I said to myself, holy blank, this will define my life, and it's either going to be good or it's going to be bad. And I was not happy. My parents had both passed away recently, and I thought I was going to be able to relax a little. And, you know, I didn't have an idea of running for governor. He would run again. And I knew what my enemies would do, and they'll try to dig up every freaking dirt in the world, which was entirely correct on that point of view. So, you know, I wasn't overly happy, but both my sons were teenagers. They were working at basketball camps separately. So I called my oldest son, Kevin. I said, Kevin, McGreevy's gay. I'm the new governor. Talk to you later. So, but it is what I did say to him. The other one I couldn't get. But the other one, unfortunately, came home that afternoon, and he sees like 50 reporters on our front lawn and thought his mother passed away.
Yeah, right.
Which was tough.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he couldn't get through to him, and but you know.
Were your kids happy for you? Were they freaked out as you were?
That's a great question. I still don't know. I mean, Kevin was away at college, you know, for the most part. He was home for the summer, obviously, and Chris was in high school. But I had decided that we weren't going to use the governor's mansion. In fact, at a press conference, somebody asked me that a couple of days later, and I said, listen, I was born and raised in Orange. So if you're born and raised in Orange, you're looking to get out of public housing, and not
I
into it.
remember, I
So,
remember reading
we're-
that quote.
We're not going to be doing that. And I just thought for my family that that would be the best thing, and it would be a more happier life for myself and for them as well. My wife wanted to continue to teach and lead a normal life as you possibly could. Understand
Sure.
you're still the governor, and so it's not a normal life. You know, you go outside and people recognize you and stuff like that. But when we would
Couldn't
go
go
out,
undercover tomorrow, bro. Psychiatric
not
hospital
that
anymore.
anymore. But people were exceedingly nice to us.
Yeah.
So it's
Now, I've got to assume that the Corzine years were awkward for you in a couple of ways. Number one, that he was the reason. Well, he had clearly
Pushed me out.
rounded up all of the votes that he needed, or all of the support that he needed in order to run for governor, and that you chose not to. So I don't know whether there was resentment there, but there certainly would have been reason for you to not be on the best of terms with him. That's number one. But 2 years into his administration, he's in an automobile accident that almost kills him. And again, as Senate President, you
Take
become
over.
acting governor with his whole apparatus that you now have to work with.
that was something
And
else.
and I think that has got to be an absolutely fascinating time for you.
So I never blamed him for it. His staff pushed him that way. And what I understood later on, that as I got more popular, he got that. He got more nervous that I would run. And at that point, I did want to run. But I never blamed him. And I never thought he was a bad person.
And you knew him as the U.S. Senator. You must have had
Right.
some interaction.
Right, but I also, in some small way, resented that because, you know, somebody who worked for a party for a long time, qualified, but the guy comes along with money, and that's legit.
Yeah.
And I think he understood that, whatever.
Well, certainly everybody who wanted to run for Senate in
He had to go.
in 1990 felt
No,
the same way.
I didn't think it was right. Doesn't make him a bad person for wanting to run. He didn't come. He wasn't born with wealth at all. But any anger that I had was more towards the bosses and the people that took the money,
Yeah.
or took the contracts or the jobs.
Is there anyone else besides Norcross who falls into this category?
At that level? No,
Okay.
not at that level. But he felt obviously that he could control them, and
Right.
to some extent, he was right. I remember he wanted, meaning Norcross, wanted a medical school for South Jersey.
Right.
Okay. Not that I was necessarily opposed, but so the way John did it, he did it through some regulations, and the only way it could be stopped is through the Senate and the Assembly passing resolutions against it. Now, the Assembly wasn't going to pass any resolution against it. Joe Roberts from South Jersey
Right.
was there. But I said to Corzine, I said, John, I said, why would you propose this in June? Why don't you see how that guy performs for you in the election in November and then decide? I said, what do you think? Really? Why don't you just wait? Because I knew that there might be a setup that he would be going the other way, and obviously I was right. You know, and it was still tough to convince John that a lot of people screwed you, pal, and they were from your party, but they didn't care about the party; they cared about themselves. And of course, Mr. Christie is a lot of his investigations and everything were political, and I put him aside. I think for prosecutors, to have political ambitions is the worst thing in the world, because it's not about justice. It's about what's best for me. How do I get the best publicity for me to run for governor? So whether it's Christie, Spitzer, Cuomo, or All the rest, it's bad, very bad. At the same time, Christie was saying, talking about running or whatever, there was a gentleman from U.S. Attorney out of Pennsylvania who said, I have to resign because I'm having thoughts of running and a desire to run for governor. And the right thing for me is to resign. And that's class, because he was right.
Back to Corzine. When he became governor, you're Senate President, what kind of working relationship did you have with him at this point?
I had a good relationship with him. The problem was his staff, who saw me as a rival or whatever, and so that lingered on. And of course, they were the ones who convinced him, become governor, you'll become president. So that was a problem. And then when he got hurt, they would do everything to shut me out,
Really?
even though I was governor. So it was a very uncomfortable time for me because I can't bring in my own staff. I didn't know how long the guy was going to be laid up or anything else. And
So would you say that during that month that you were acting governor when he was laid up in the hospital and then doing rehab, that basically his staff ran the governor's office, and you continued
to a
to be
large
Senate
degree.
President?
Now, of course, when there's flooding all over, my ass got sent out, for the people who complain about it and stuff like that. But the everyday process of government was being done by them, and the DEP person, she told me she was told not to invite me to an event, stuff like that, childish, whatever. But see, John was not a street guy. He's a very bright person, but he was born and raised on a farm in Illinois. Didn't have the same kind of childhood that I did. Not that mine was better or worse, but so a lot of guys got over on him, even though he ran Goldman Sachs and did a pretty good job of making money for himself and a lot of other people.
When you won re-election to the Senate in 2009.
Well, that was in a different district.
The year that Christie, no, that was before the 2010 census.
Okay,
so that
so when
was still in the old
Christie-
district.
when Christie
Christie
ran.
was elected in 2009. You won re-election to the Senate. But when the Senate reconvened in January of 2010, you were on the losing side of what NJ.com described as a sweeping political power play that ousted you as the Senate president.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
And I saw it coming. So Mr. Norcross and allies that allied with him, either through business interests or strictly political interests, were lining up. And they had tried for years and years to get me out of the Senate. I was offered every job under the sun, the highest paying job in government, run the sports authority, do this or whatever, but just get the hell out of our way, all right? So I wouldn't do it, and I knew that would be a tough fight, but listen, my father once told me, listen, when it comes to political bosses, if you take a job from them, they're gonna have you buy your onions, and your heart and your mind will follow. So don't ever do it. And I never took a job. Never, ever. I would never put myself in that situation. But other people have and do, and some of them are good people, but they owe their financial allegiance to somebody else or whatever. And so he went all over the state, flying the helicopter around, getting the votes. And there were some people that came to me and were extremely upset, but just a dick guy. Things that would happen to me, I can't have happen, that had committed or whatever. And I never got mad at any of them, who got this and who got that, because they were going to be against me. I wasn't giving out jobs or anything else for votes. I did a good job. I had one person the week after the vote came into my office and slammed the door, and they said, I effing apologize. They're bastards. I know.
Would you say that you have good relationship with your colleagues today in the Senate?
I would say yes. Now, the unfortunate thing that's happened in the Senate is that if you don't agree with those who run it, in ways you get punished. Something I would never do. If you weren't for me for president of the Senate or this or whatever, I didn't, punish you. And when the Congress reconvenes, they listen to their state chairman as to who to vote for the Speaker or the Majority Leader in U.S. Senate? Of course not. But right after I lost, I wasn't entitled to an office. Despite what I had done for the party, particularly going back to 2001, where I developed a new system of redistricting that helped more minorities get elected and more Democrats get elected. I was told I have to sit in the back.
You're not supposed to admit that it was to get more Democrats elected. Because
No, they happen to be minority. Listen, anytime the Republicans want to run minorities in districts that they can win in, do it. They only run them where they can't win.
Right.
So that's a whole other story. I like a lot of Republicans. They're my friends, but it's time to change. So in any event, I wasn't given any committee assignments in terms of being a chair or whatever.
How did you get along with Christie's
I didn't.
office?
Okay. There were some people there that I liked. Christie I saw as a bully. People did not, but they sure do now. I don't like bullies. I hate bullies. They shouldn't run government. And it was sad. The guy's got a brain, but it was all about getting his way, and obviously the moment he became governor, he thought about becoming president. And there's no doubt about that, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but you can't tell me people weren't gone after in the U.S. Attorney's Office for a political purpose, nor would you be able to tell me that the same thing happened when he was governor. The things that went on, that some people got away with crimes that were aligned with him, people who didn't really commit a crime but went down because it was good for him politically. So I think it was a very, very sad time. I mean, I would have loved to have worked with him, but I'm not going to do what he tells me every time. And as I said, I saw things and I saw people and their families hurt that were good, decent, honest people, but were being used as political sacrifices. And he knew I felt that way, and it is what it is. I mean, it's just, as I said, it's unfortunate. When I see his wife or his kids, I'm a gentleman.
What do you make of the current climate in Trenton between the Senate president and the governor?
Well, I did say the other day that 90% of all Democrats are in favor of the millionaire's tax. So that means that the only opposition is from Democrats in the legislature. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we all voted for it, all of them, When Christie was in office, that was more like makes that look like a stunt. Oh, we know it's never going to pass. He's not going to sign it, so, we'll vote for it now and not later. Listen, if I don't care if they moved it from 1 million to 3 million or whatever, but we need the revenue. We need the revenue to do other things, and we got to have it.
Why? Is this a North Jersey, South Jersey thing?
It's got nothing to do with geography.
Okay.
It's all about personal politics. That's a crock. A crock. Most of the population is up north. The people who contribute to the state treasury almost all up north. But that doesn't matter to me. I want to do what's right for the state. I can be parochial at times when I have to be, if I see an injustice, but what was going on is not about injustice. The only injustice was perpetrated by those who thought they would use injustice for their own personal gain.
Would it be safe to say that you're frustrated in your current situation? That after
No.
having served 3 times as governor, having served for many years as majority leader, now you don't have a title, you're in the Senate, but
no.
it sounds as though it's not a particularly enjoyable time to be in the Senate.
No, because I had the balls to stand up. And I wish more would do the same. So as long as I got breath in me, I want to do the right thing. I'm not trying to be pompous or anything else. I'm not always the right on all the issues, but I just want a legislature that wants to do the right thing for the people of the state of New Jersey and not for anybody else.
One final question, since this is for the Center on the American Governor. Byrne, Kane, Florio, Whitman, DeFrancesco, McGreevey, you, Corzine, Christie, Murphy. Okay, 10 administrations you've been through.
Well, Murphy's only got
All right, 9.5. How are there ways in which the relationship between the legislature and the governor has changed? Has the office of the governor changed over this period? And if so, in what ways has it changed?
Yeah, well,
and how does it and how does the interaction between the legislature and the governor, how has that shifted over that 45-year period?
There was a time back when Whitman was governor, and she didn't get along with the Republicans who were running the legislature. But that was both their faults, that they didn't communicate more. And she should have learned to cultivate those relationships. So that had nothing to do with political bosses at all. I still think she was a good person. But now you had 8 years where the Democrats, the majority, capitulated to Mr. Christie, who's considered the worst governor in modern history. Why? I'll let historians decide why that happened and how that happened. And now, a lot of them are upset that Murphy comes along and wins the apple cart. And that pissed a lot of people off in my party. He won. He won it fair. He won it square. It's not an outsider that I've known since '99. But, when are we going to just sit down and do the right thing? I don't know. I just don't know. But I think a lot of people are getting tired of the same old game. But who knows whether it will change? And I'm not going to change.
I think I have to say after these 2 hours or whatever that's fairly
Has it
obvious.
been that long? Holy blank. Oh, my Lord. Oh, but Jesus.
Any other final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I got a
other than
funeral-
the fact that you have to go?
I got to run a funeral visitation.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Dick.
Thank you.